All right, Sean Callery, you've been the composer on Homeland for the past 5 seasons. Does it get any easier writing music for this show, or are there still challenges in
Uh, it does not get easier. I, I wish it did, but no. If you're a fan of the series, it's the metaphor I use is every episode's like a bottle of wine. It's its own little vintage and its own little recipe, and everyone works so very hard on the execution of the story. And it's as you know, it's a beautifully subtle, almost real world execution. And no, it's just you're always finding you're always having to be as you're as it's as new to you now in season 5 as it was in season 1, and it's also every season's been so completely different as fans would remember. There's been this fascinating arc of the central character, and some have come and gone. So
yeah, well, that's what's so interesting about it is that in season 4, which is when I last talked to you, there was this complete reset of what the show was about almost. I mean, there's still the Claire Danes character. It's still about the CIA, but whole new ball game there without Brody in it.
It was a very interesting time, I think, creatively for everybody, because the series began with this fascinating energy between these two extraordinary characters, and certainly the extraordinary acting. And the show, we knew that there was, I think they knew that there was more story to be told, but it did require a little bit of contemplation about how a show would flow and how it would go without Nicholas Brody. And now we've gone 2 seasons. We fondly remember him, and dare I say we were a little protective of him, even on the Billions show. I always see him as Nicholas Brody rather than as the billionaire. But no, he was a great character, and I love it when he comes back in dreams or visions of any kind. There was a lot of wonderful musical opportunities when when his character was out and about.
Mm-hmm. Well, take us back to the beginning, because what's so interesting about this show is that it's a thriller, much like what you did in 24, but it's very different in terms of its style and tone. So can you talk about writing the music for that?
I would say, 24 developed into becoming this. It was kind of a propulsive action thriller series, and I think Homeland at the core is a political thriller. I think a lot of the action is happening in the pauses and the spaces in between dialogue. It's funny. There's a bit of a I don't know how to quite say it, a contradiction of sorts. It aspires to have a very real world kind of quality, like you're a voyeur, like on the wall watching people. And yet the presence of any underscore is unnatural, because we don't have underscore music in our daily lives. So I think the directive writing the music for the show is that the music should be effective. God, excuse me, I've got a I'm sure this is wonderful viewing for the Google audience. The music is felt more than it is sort of consciously flourishing out there as other shows that I work on do. The music has a more of a presence, sometimes melodically and so forth, in other series like Jessica Jones, which was a very jazz-fueled, melodic, intimate experience. Homeland is a more spatial, very sparsely drawn score, and it has to be effective without drawing unnecessary attention to itself. So it's a bit of a challenge, and it's a wonderful challenge. I mean, when you're working on that kind of a series with that kind of acting, Mandy Patinkin and Claire Danes, and I mean everyone, it's just it's a joy. It's tough, but it's a joy.
You bring up Jessica Jones and the use of jazz in that show. You use jazz as well in Homeland in some really interesting and surprising ways. So would you say that you use it differently in Homeland, or?
I would say over the course of Homeland's life, it's the jazz vernacular has come and gone. I think it was more present, but just organically, it just appears. It has appeared less. It more or less represented itself in Carrie Matheson's lonelier moments as a person, or when she's in more of an alone space, the piano melodies that came up there. Ironically, my work on Homeland actually got me the job on Jessica Jones. The executive producer of Jessica Jones was the brilliant Melissa Rosenberg. She just thought there was something in, she heard something, she said, in the music to the Homeland score that she thought might lie in service to the Jessica Jones series. And the Jessica Jones music became something so completely wonderfully different. That was a truly discovering process of finding the tone of that show. We knew we wanted it to be kind of a neo-noir kind of sound. And you say, well, I'll just go to the shelf and grab my neo-noir recipes. There wasn't really any kind of conscious idea as to what that would be. But we found, as I started exploring the colors of Jessica Jones, that the intimate and smaller and more organic the sound, the more it clicked with the series. Because Jessica Jones is mercurial. She's just kind of a smart aleck. She lives in the shadows. She has a dark past, but she has also a very warm heart, and the show had to kind of honor all those points. It was and another interesting thing. I don't know why I'm remembering this, but when you work on a Marvel series, which was the first of its kind, I had to get security clearance. You have to get security clearance to look at the content because it's so brilliant and there were so many people interested and so forth. So the very first images I actually saw of the show were stills. They brought me to the office before I could get the video on site here until the security was upgraded here. And they just showed little snippets of Kristen Ritter, and then David Tennant and the sets and Luke Cage, and oh man, it was just seeing snapshots was actually really, really cool, because I got to see that before I saw moving images, almost like looking at a flip book or something. It was from a creative point of view, it was very neat just to get those things and then just look at them and then have to go home and conjure up ideas and so forth from just those memories.
And again, that kind of sound too, I think, is atypical for what you would expect from a Marvel show. And Jessica Jones, a lot to its credit, is sort of atypical to what you would expect from a superhero show,
Yeah. Man, I'm laughing because there's a fight scene in a bar in episode 2 in Luke's bar. And I remember it was going to be like kind of a quasi superhero kind of fight, because Luke has there I am again. Luke has he's indestructible, and Jessica has an amazing strength. Anyway, I kind of orchestrally went towards larger percussive textures and so forth. And I remember playing it for Melissa, and she said, she goes, it sounds great. She says, but I still think the show is still an intimate show, even during a violent, fight. She goes, I just love the sound of the regular drum kit. We were experimenting with that. And I thought, well, that is a extraordinarily bold idea. So the fight scenes were executed more with smaller instrumentation, right? And it was unique to any series that I've ever worked on. I always try to make things different, but I will admit I defaulted into larger textures when I saw very large, grand strength and mayhem ensuing. But in the end, it ended up having its own kind of fascinating color, which Melissa supported and Jeff Loeb supported at Marvel. So that was, I cannot say enough about them supporting the process, because I can only speak for myself, but I find myself very, very, it's very helpful to me when you feel you have the support above you when you're going for these kinds of things.
So also recently you got to return to 24 with, was it Live Another Day? I was getting mixed up with like these James Bond sounding titles. I almost called it Die Another Day.
Yet another day.
Yes. What was it like coming back to that show after so many years and writing music for it again?
Well, there's this little, I finished the show in 2008, and I believe we started looking at new footage 5 years later in 2013, 14. It was a long time. And there was a little bit of like, because since then I'd gone on to Homeland, and then I did Elementary and a few other projects. And so the sort of palette and the sort of just the sort of energy slash pacing of that kind of series, to come back to it, there's always a little part of you that says, geez, I hope I can even, connect with it, because it was at a very unique time in my career, the beginning of my career. It went on for an unprecedented, no one knew the show would last as long as it did. So for it to go even 8 years was a true blessing. But I think everyone, from the writers to the actors to everybody, has that little like, well, let's just make a good show. Let's tell a good story and make a good show. And so the moment it came together, the moment I saw it, having it shot in England was very inspiring. It was very different. It was very densely action oriented because it was compressed from 24 to 12 hours. So I think every episode had just, oh man, that was a crazy summer. That was a crazy summer. But they did a new one. There's an entirely rebooted story that's coming out in January. I think it's premiering after the Super Bowl, called 24 Legacy. Right. And I just finished that about 2.5 weeks ago. And it's fabulous. It's the same time running intensity format, but it's an entirely new cast, and it was fantastic. I'm hoping people really like it. It was a blast to work on, and so was Live Another Day. It was just interesting to see an entire new story fit within the storytelling format that made 24 so unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So with you also write music for Bones and various other shows. Where do you find the time, I guess, is what take us through a typical scoring of an episode of any show. Like, where do you start?
Well, I'll for example, I think the last show I worked on this calendar spring season was Elementary, which is a wonder. I love that show. It's so well made. It's filmed in New York. Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu star in it. The first thing is a spotting session. You go and sit down with the picture editor and the producers, and you play down the episode, and you get a feel for how it's playing and how it's pacing. A lot of times there's some temp score in there from previous episodes just to sort of get a point of conversation going. Mm-hmm. And other times there's other exotic kinds of directions that are kind of suggested. And then I sit next to a loyal music editor, Chris McGeary, and he goes home and types up spotting notes. And the spotting notes, I don't know if I have a set in front of me, but the spotting notes basically tell you how many minutes of music you have to compose in that episode. And mm-hmm. and I look at it kind of this way: if you have 5 days to do it, and you have a 30-minute score, that's 6 minutes. Any way you cut it, you have to put away 6 to 8 minutes a day. I tend to mix on the last day. And so psychologically speaking, that's how I think of it. You have to do the composing part is really the probably the hardest part, just to get your sense of it. And then when you complete it, you play it back. Then they review it, and then we make adjustments. And then then it goes to the mix stage, where it's mixed with the sound effects and the dialogue, and then the whole merry-go-round starts all over again on the next day. I will say there is one stress relief. I don't know if I can show it here, but earlier this year, I'm a real fan of video games, and I found an old 1980s cocktail table, Galaga Pac-Man combo machine, which is very good for the soul when you're stressed out. It's just nothing but firing. It's just firing at aliens. So, but what happens, to answer your question, is what I've noticed since the days of 24, and 24 used to have, there are still shows that have 22 and 24 episode seasons. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you would have more of a drier period in the summer. It was when we were kids. I'm older than you, but the repeat, you see a lot of repeats and things like that. Yeah. But with streaming media and with the proliferation of such high level cable content, whether it's HBO or Showtime, between that, Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix, there is so much crazy great television. Mm-hmm. I love watching shows that you actually are at a point where you can't watch all the great shows. It used to be that you could watch just the great shows, and now there's just too many great shows. So what I think is great for people like me and people who want to do what we do is there's a lot of interesting content, and there's a lot of interesting music to be written for those things. And the shows sometimes are smaller. They're 10, 12 episodes, and they tend to overlap over the year. So you have, it's a bit of juggling at certain crunch times during the year, but you, if you're doing your job right, you're hopefully planning for those kinds of contingencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is an embarrassment of riches out there.
Oh.
Just right before this interview, I was trying to crunch in a couple of episodes of various things. What is the benefit of sticking with a show for as long as you stay with it and continuing to write music for it?
That's a really great question. I mean, I on 24 and Homeland, I do remember one person in the industry. It wasn't an agent. It was somebody, I forgot who it was. Someone I was really fortunate enough to receive an Emmy award in the second year for my work on 24. And someone said, "Okay, now it's time for, go do movies and dispatch the show to someone else." And there's just some part of me that I can't explain it. You feel kind of a loyalty to the shows you work on, and I just couldn't imagine leaving them. And 24 was very rewarding artistically when it was on. Homeland remains very, very rewarding creatively, very challenging creatively. Bones was a show that came along when I was finishing up Medium for CBS with Patricia Arquette, which is another great series that Glenn Caron created. And I knew I was at that point in my in my career where I was just physically incapable of working on all of it on my own. So I had actually had one assistant at the time who had been working for me for about 2-3 years, and he was a good composer. He just hadn't done a lot of work. And this other woman, another composer, Julia Newman. So it's Jamie Forsythe and Julia Newman. They were ready. They were ready to work on Bones, and so I went directly to the Bones people, and I said, I would really love to work on this. It was a lighter CSI kind of fare, and I said, but I absolutely have to have these two individuals with me. So it was very on the level, and the show. Who would have known the show would now be? It's going to see a 12th year, 12 episodes. Yeah, 12 years, and it's a very well made show. I know it doesn't get a lot of Emmy nods and things of that nature, but it's really well directed and incredibly well acted and extremely well written. And so it's been the longer you get to know these people, that there's a richness that comes to knowing Stephen Nathan and Howard Gordon and Alex Ganza. These are the producers and Carl Beverly and Rob Doherty on Elementary. These are people that I would love to work with the rest of my career if I could. So we try to make it all work.
So speaking of Emmys, you've won 3 of them, and behind your head I see various plaques from the ASCAP Awards.
Don't forget the popcorn machine. That was not an award. That was just a birthday gift, but it's nice. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That is very nice. As a popcorn connoisseur,
it's the old style. It's like the old style butter. I'm sure it's very unhealthy, but yet there it is.
I'm an expert at using those things, actually. But I'm just curious what that recognition means to you. Getting nominated for awards and winning awards. What does that mean for you?
It's impossible to answer this without it sounding campy, but I've never ever expected ever to get you never expect to get nominated. You don't expect it. You hope your work is good enough. And then in this time of our lives when there's so much amazing work out there, I mean, just name a show. There are so many great composers doing work. You feel very humbled that you get nominated by your peers. It's a peers are looking at it, they're making a decision. And unlike the Motion Picture Academy, in the final judging, that is also a peer. That's not a general vote. That's voted by your peers. So when someone receives an Emmy Award, it is nominated by your peers, and then if you're fortunate enough to make the final group, that's also voted on by a group of peers that are working in your industry. So for me, it's incredibly humbling, and you feel very grateful. I mean, there's just no way around it. And the ASCAP acknowledgments over the years have been very sweet, and that becomes like a family too. You meet people along the way who do what we do, and it's hard for us to socialize. We live a lot. Some of us live close to each other, but we have a very isolating kind of gig. We spend a lot of time alone. You can ask our spouses; they will confirm this, and we do our best. And so as I get older, the more you interact with and acknowledge and work with others in our group, I think that's just incredibly healthy for us. It's good for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you again, and congratulations on all your work.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you again, and apologies for my technical snafus earlier.
No, not a problem. It happens sometimes.
And you take care. I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the flesh one day.
Yeah, same here. Maybe at this year's Emmys or something.
That'd be nice. Wouldn't it be knock wood for us both? So anyway.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too. Have a great day. Bye.